And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, today we're taking a look at a game called Corporate America Business as Usual. Now this game looks innocuous, I suppose. You can see the people shaking hands with money, and obviously people are often cynical about businesses. Well, this game joins in that and takes a look at it in a lighthearted manner, but at the same time, it's an economic game where you are really trying to get the most money. It pokes fun at the things that the president is elected by folks who have the most money, try to have businesses as much as, try to have a lot of business in play, try to satisfy different political groups. The game is one that's obviously like a satirical look at our society, but is it a good game is what we want to say. Let's take a look. Corporate America comes with one of the coolest pieces ever in the game, a miniature Washington's monument, which you will move around the track here. The game will take a certain number of rounds, depending on the number of players. The way you keep track of rounds is you have a certain number of executive privilege cards here. One of those will be taken each round by whoever's president. When they're all gone, after the main street phase, the game will be over. Now, this game is going to revolve around businesses making money. And so players are going to have a handful of business cards at the beginning of the game. Each turn during the Wall Street phase, they're going to draw two of them, add those cards to their hand, then discard one of those cards, and then play a business in front of them. At the beginning of the game, they'll play 3 or 4 businesses, again, depending on how many players are in the game. Let's take a closer look at the businesses. Each of the businesses here, first of all, they have a name, which is usually a ripoff of some, popular company, although a few of them are also, kind of innuendo-filled names. But each business has a startup cost. In the red arrow, that's how much you pay to play that card in front of you. And then they also have industry icons on them. So this one has entertainment, health. This one has home, transportation, food, and sin. That's the kind of industries that those are. So when those industries produce, you will get the money in the blue arrow. So you can see that Mile High Airlines here costs 4. Every time a transportation makes money, they will make 10. That's pretty good. However, it also has some negatives. You can see that it has polluting and labor, and there are different kinds of negatives that you can have. For example, Factory Farms down here has polluting and labor also. Also, some of these will have special abilities. The patent trolls here, or the audibly antiquated vinyl. There's different special abilities that you can get that you can use on them. So players are going to take these and place them in front of them. And then we're going to move to the consumer phase. Now in the consumer phase, players are going to one at a time draw a consumer card. Now most of the time that consumer, for example, this says consume green. Every person who has a green company is going to make the amount of money that's shown in the blue arrow. If I turned over consume food, the same thing is going to happen. Now, what you can do when you're drawing these cards is you can pay to draw more than one card. For example, down here, if I want to, I can always get one card for free, but I can draw a second card for 4, and then I can draw a third card for 6 for a total of 10, which is expensive. But that way, let's say I want to draw just 2 cards. I might draw luxury and technology, and I say, well, I have 3 technology businesses. I'd rather play the technology card. So there is that possibility. If you have more than one company of the same type, let's say I have 5 technology companies, and technology is, I'll get money for each of those companies plus a bonus of $14. You are allowed to bribe other players to play the cards that you want, so hopefully they'll turn those over. There are also several cards in this deck that when they show up, you're forced to play them. You get to draw a replacement for them. But there are protests, like here we have Save the Whales, and What Would Jesus Do, and Occupy Everything. Each of these protests has a symbol, and they are placed above the board up here where I put the money for now. But this were protests. Money in this game, by the way, is cards. They all have the same back, so you can keep your money hidden. I actually like this money much better than paper money. Card money is fine. So when all 8 of these spaces are filled up with a consume, after they've been played by different players, then that round is over. That's the Main Street round, and we go to the campaign trail. During the campaign trail round, we clear the board, and we're going to play out different legislation cards. There's 6 red spots, so we'll play 6 legislation cards here. Now, whoever is the president is going to pick which of these laws is going to come into play. So we'll look at some of these. Some of these are one-time things here. For example, there's a fine. Everyone has to pay 8 for each labor business that they own. Over here, this revokes a previous law. Here's a giveaway. Divide $15 as you choose between players who own food businesses. Some of these are laws. This is a law here. This will take place for the rest of the game. You'll put it underneath the board where it says laws. This law here says labor and food business have -2 income. Here, players pay $8 for each sin business, and sin businesses have -2 income. So what you're going to be doing during this phase is there are 3 rounds where players are going to vote for president, and you vote with money. You will place money in front of one player, as many money cards as you want, and then everyone has one chance to do that. Then you go to the next round, everyone has a chance to put more cards, and then everyone has a chance to put more cards, and then you flip over all the cards, and whoever has the most money in front of them becomes the president of the United States. After someone becomes president of the United States, we will turn over 2 more legislation cards, and then the president will pick 3 of these legislation cards that will come into play. They also have the chance to revoke 1 law that already may be in play they can get rid of. And the president will also take the top executive privilege card, which at the end of the game is worth $5, or will give you a special ability that you can use during the course of the game. Now, at the top of the board, if you remember, there was a possibility of protests. Let's say, for example, we have vote or cry was at the top of the board. You can see this is a democratic protest, and so the president must satisfy that protest and must pick 1 law, if possible, that has an icon. So, for example, here, he must pick the workplace violation fines to satisfy that protest. He has no option on that one at all. But let's say a conservative one had shown up at the top of the board with the elephant. He could have picked that one. He would have had a much bigger choice to satisfy that protest. If he can't satisfy that protest, then the protest stays there for a future president to deal with. After the president has done this and given out money and put laws into effect, then we go back and we draw more businesses and we keep going until all the executive privilege cards are gone. Then we go all the way back to one last Main Street phase and the game is over. Whoever has the most money is the winner. Before we get into the game itself, let's talk about the theme. The theme is, like I said at the beginning, it's a satirical look at American society. Now, I'm always a little cautious about that because it's possible that it will take one point of view, and at the end of the game people come to blows because of that. I think this hits everyone, conservatives and liberals and green ideologists and religious. It hits everything seemingly equal. So I don't think anyone's going to come out of here saying that, oh, it has a slant towards whatever ideology. It's more like Mad Magazine. But it's a little bit more subtle in that regard. And speaking of that, I mentioned some of the cards had some innuendo in them. Keep that in mind. There was a couple cards when I played, and I played with some younger folk. The game does say 14 and older. The game itself, I read the rules and said that this isn't a hard game. But someone said, what does that mean? Why are all the adults laughing? Well, let's move on there. So keep that in mind that that's in the game. The game itself is a very interesting one because the money is tighter in this game than you think. It feels like money's free-flowing. You're like, oh, wow, I just got all this money. And because you can bribe other players, because you can argue and vote for the president that you want, and you will pick a president, hopefully, who will pick your interest. At first, people are like bidding on themselves for president. Then you realize that if you lose, all that money that's bid for president is gone. It's gone because, it's campaign contributions or whatever. So you have to be very cautious. And you can spend lots of money in this game and think you did pretty well. And at the end, maybe the person who spent the least money won because they just sat there on all their money. It's a very strong possibility. And there's money coming in and money going out. So since money is secret, it's really, unless you're playing with a savant, it's going to be impossible to keep track of how much money everybody has. But you can see, for example, when entertainment comes up and I see that Sam has 8 entertainment companies, I probably don't want to play that card. Buying extra cards is really expensive, really expensive. 2's not so bad. And there's businesses that give you a discount But when you buy 3 cards, it's really pushing it. But sometimes you do that because buying 3 cards to give yourself 50 or 60 bucks can be a big deal. Of course, the more cards you buy, the more protests that show up. But if you're not the president, who cares? Watching what laws come into effect and things. It's a very interesting game. The game says on here 90 to 120 minutes. I think that games will actually, as long as you don't get too caught up in negotiations, I think 90 minutes is more likely. It's unusual. And then when a game tells you it plays a little longer, then I think it will. It's very easy to teach and very easy to understand. The rule book has plenty of examples. This is I believe this was a Kickstarter project. In fact, I know it was a Kickstarter project because there's like 600 names in the back. And it's a very well done one. You would think this was one done by a company, and for that, I applaud them. They did a very good job. Nothing Sacred Games. So I don't really have anything negative to say about this. I think it's a very fine game, other than, keep an eye on the age limits, and some of the ha-ha humor wasn't as clever as I think the people who wrote it was, but what have you. The game itself, though, is cool. The Washington Monument piece is cool. It's easy to teach, easy to play, scales well between number of players. That's corporate America.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Shut the door?
Door?